So if you're not using a foliar spray to help supplement the growth of your immersed aquarium plants, you're really missing out on some important growth. So in this video, I'm going to show you my secret recipe on how I make a simple foliar spray and how I use it that's getting me some incredible results in my immersed aquarium plants. So let's get into the recipe. All right, so laid out in front of us here is the hydroponic fertilizers that I have been using with a lot of really great success in my ebb and flow system. Now, fortunately for a foliar spray, I have found that you can simply use the same fertilizers that you would normally use in a hydroponic setup, except at a slightly diluted concentration. So I'm going to show you the ratios that I think makes a really great foliar spray. And again, I'm using the Jack's Nutrients fertilizers, which I have a separate video going over exactly why I made the switch to this fertilizer and why I think it is going to work really great for growing immersed plants in the future. Now, my one caveat with using the Jack's fertilizer is that it does call for some Epsom salt, which I do have a bag of it right here. And the reason why we use Epsom salt is because this is magnesium sulfate. So when we add that into our fertilizers, it's going to provide magnesium, which is an essential element for growing our plants. Now, because where I live, I have really hard water and it is naturally high in magnesium. So I actually have found it to be a little bit detrimental to add more magnesium into my hydroponic fertilizer because it throws off the concentrations in my blend and actually has some detrimental effects on my plants. So for that reason, because I am using tap water, I am not going to be using Epsom salt. However, if you're looking to make a similar foliar spray and you live in an area that has soft water, I'll let you know exactly how much Epsom salt to use in your blend. And as you can see here, I'm going to be mixing 1 liter of solution, and what we're actually going to be making out of this 1 liter solution is the full strength hydroponic fertilizer, and then from that solution we are going to dilute it and turn it into our foliar spray. So from left to right, if we are making 1 liter of solution, as I mentioned, we're going to be adding 1 gram of the part A, we're going to be adding 0.26 grams of the Epsom salt, and we're going to be adding 0.67 grams of the part B. All right, so here we go. We're adding the part A. It's a little stuck to my bowl here, so I'm just going to rinse that off. And fair warning, it can take a little while before everything is fully dissolved, but it is really important to make sure it is fully dissolved before you move on to the next ingredient, because if not, you could have issues where there are some chemical reactions that lock out the nutrients and make them unavailable for your plants. So as long as you're taking your time and making sure everything is fully dissolved, you shouldn't have any of those issues following this recipe. So now that everything is dissolved from part A, and I'm not using Epsom salt with my tap water, I'm going to move on and add part B. All right, so the next step is to use some pH down, which is essentially phosphoric acid, and we're going to use this to lower the pH into a range that is most optimal for growing our plants. And that range is going to be anywhere in between 5.5 to 6.5. Now, because I have very hard water, I do find it a necessary step to add some pH down. However, depending on your source water, especially if you have softer water, this step may not be 100% required. However, it is always good practice to have either a pH pen or some sort of test kit that you can monitor the pH just to make sure that things are optimal for your plants. So let's see what the starting pH is of this solution, and we'll add drop by drop this phosphoric acid, and it really doesn't take that much phosphoric acid to lower the pH. So we might be only looking at adding a few drops for this 1 liter volume of water. So we'll add the pH pen in and we'll see where we are. All right, so fortunately for us, the pH is sitting at around 6.4, which is definitely within the range that we are targeting. However, I do find that my pH tends to rise over time, especially because the hard water that my tap water has quite a bit of buffering capacity. And another thing to mention is because we are going to be diluting this even further for our foliar spray, I'm going to be adding more of that tap water. So I do think it is going to be beneficial for us to add some pH down into this solution, but I think based on where we're starting at, it's probably only going to be a few drops of the pH down. All right, that looks pretty good. So we added 3 drops of the pH down, and now our pH is sitting at around 5.85 right now. So I think that's probably a good range. Once we add a little bit more tap water to get the right dilution, we should be sitting at the upper end of the range that we're targeting, which I think will be good for our plants. As you can see, I have my spray bottle here. Now, word of advice, it's probably best to store this in an area that doesn't have light so you don't get algae like I do. But nevertheless, these spray bottles you can get at pretty much any Home Depot or dollar store. Now, the thing that I like about this one is it actually has some dilution ratios here that makes it incredibly easy to get the amount of dilution that we're looking for. Now, as I mentioned, the 1 liter that we mixed over here is the full strength Jack's fertilizer. Now, you can play around with different dilution ratios, and I imagine that with different setups and different species of plants, you'll be able to find a ratio that works best for you. However, for the variety of plants that I have grown, I have found that a 1/4 strength from the full strength Jack's fertilizer here has been doing a really great job at helping to supplement some of the growth in my systems. All right, so for me to get the 1/4 strength solution that I'm looking for, I need to first fill this bottle to the 3:1 ratio line here with the nutrient solution, and then fill the rest of the bottle up with regular tap water. And to do that, I've got a handy little funnel here. All right, so there we go. We're at the 3:1 line with the nutrient solution, and then I'm gonna go and fill the rest of the bottle up with tap water. All right, and there we have it. Give this a quick mix, and now we have our 1/4 strength solution, which is going to work absolutely perfectly as our foliar spray. Now, if you're curious exactly what is a foliar spray, it is simply just a diluted nutrient solution, just like the one we made here, that you spray directly onto the leaves of your plants. So this would only really be applicable to growing immersed plants or any kind of terrestrial plants. I'm sure this foliar spray would also work really great for house plants as well. Now, the important key point here is that you do want it to be a diluted solution, because if you put too much nutrients on the leaves of our plants, it can cause something called nutrient burn, which essentially will cause some yellowing and browning of the leaves. And obviously we don't want that in our plants. So I have found that when I'm using the Jack's Nutrients, a 1/4 strength solution is a pretty good dilution amount, and I haven't seen any kinds of nutrient burn on my plants. Now, if you're using a different type of fertilizer, you can also probably use that as a foliar spray. So I've crunched the numbers on this specific dilution, and I'll put the numbers on screen on exactly what the nutrient composition is, and so you can compare that to whatever nutrients you have, and you can figure out exactly what kind of dilution you need to do to achieve a similar composition to the nutrients that I'm using here. And as long as you're following and using a similar composition, you shouldn't have any worry of having any kind of nutrient burn on your plants. Now, to use this foliar spray, I would recommend using it every couple days or so and spray it directly on your plants. You can play around and see exactly the right frequency that works for you with your foliar spray. After all, this is just a supplementary source of nutrients for your plants. So the majority of nutrients that they're going to use to grow is going to come from the main growing media, whether you're growing plants in a soil tub or a setup just like mine that's using hydroponic nutrient solution. And now that we've got our foliar spray ready, I'll take you on a quick little tour and we'll feed some of the plants in my fish room. All right, so let's start applying this foliar spray to some of our immersed plants here. So as you can see, we've got a ton of anubias down there. And one tip too with the foliar spray is try to get as fine of a mist as possible. The smaller the water droplets, there's actually some studies that have shown it enhances the uptake of those nutrients. So as much of a mist as possible is going to give you the best results with your plants. And just like that, foliar sprays are an incredibly simple but important aspect to fertilizing your aquarium plants. Now, if you're curious to learn more about this specific setup, which I'm able to grow hundreds of aquarium plants all in a relatively easy to maintain system, click through to this video here and I give an in-depth tour on what this system is, as well as how you can build it yourself. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care.